Welcome to the Movie Take Podcast, starring Zach Mansberry.
Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Movie Take Podcast. Today I'm lucky enough to be joined by one of the filmmakers behind the movie, Camino, John Patrick Hughes. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Great. So, right out of the gate, you aren't listed as the director of the movie.
That's true.
But you wear many hats behind it. Could you tell me about those?
Yeah. Okay. So, part of what this movie originally was going to be is an excuse for me and my really good friend Justin to make a movie together, and also an opportunity for him because he was in grad school at the time when we made this film. We were still in college. We made it like during the summer. We shot it during the summer in between semesters. And so it was his graduate thesis project, and in order to graduate from the grad school we went to, you had to direct a feature film, which is a really insane task to like give to kids in grad schools, to have to raise money and go make a 90-minute movie.
A lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure and a lot of work. And so, yeah, we teamed up to make this movie. So Justin is the director on the film because that's how Justin got his degree, which we were all very happy he got. But we co-produced, we did all the location scouting together. We did all the scheduling together. We cast the movie together. On set, I was there as a line producer. I did some camera operating. I was also doing rewrites as we went. And then we edited the film together and did literally everything. We did everything short of work the craft services table, but we did buy the craft services. So we kind of even did that. So yeah, very much a 50-50 partnership. I think Justin and my names are in the credits 12 times a piece if you look hard enough, just spread throughout there. But yeah, so I did a lot of stuff, but I did not direct this movie.
So as a project for him to graduate, was this a movie that you guys had an idea for before it became a project, or was that something that came with the assignment?
Well, so the movie idea came from, the movie idea really came from me, growing up in East Texas, and stealing coolers out of the bed of people's trucks when I was a less valuable member of society and a much younger man than I am today. And, I was doing it one day, or I was about to do it one day, and a buddy of mine really didn't want to, which made sense. But one of our friends was like, "What's the worst thing that could happen?" And I was like, "Well, I think this is probably the worst thing that could happen." And the worst thing that could happen if you steal the cooler out of somebody's truck is this movie. That's where the idea came from. And then a few years later, I found myself in film school taking a screenwriting class, and the final project for the screenwriting class was to write a feature screenplay. The midterm was to pitch your idea, and your screenplay had to be turned in by the end of the semester. And so I wrote Camino in that class, and Justin was actually in that class with me. And so when I pitched it, for the midterm, he came up to me and he was like, "I think it's a great idea for a movie." And we'd already started to become friends at that point. But over the next 6 or 7 months, we got to be really good buddies. And then when the day came where he realized he had to make a film so he could graduate, he reached out to me one day and he was like, "What if we made Camino?" He was like, "I'd direct it because that's what I have to do." He's like, "But we'll do everything else 50-50. I think we'd have a better chance of making a good movie with, two heads are better than one sort of thing." And so, yeah. And that's when it really became something we were like, "Oh, we're going to shoot this and it's going to happen now." Because when I wrote it, I was thinking maybe a decade from now or something, I'll come back to my little hometown and make this movie. And it ended up being 6 months later. I think we were in production trying to make it happen. So yeah, that's how it came about.
So basically throughout film school, they pretty much took you through the process of making it, and you guys took that and ran with it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess so. I didn't really think about it like that, but yeah. Throughout going to film school, you take all your classes, and each semester you learn a little bit more, and you kind of work your way up through working on your friends' short films and upperclassmen's short films and graduate students short films and stuff, and you work as a PA and you do some work as a grip, and then maybe you're an electrician or a sound operator or a camera operator, yada yada yada. And eventually you take your screenwriting class, and I guess when we got to the end of it, Justin and I looked at each other. I guess at that point we were like, well, I guess we could just take this script and all the things we just learned and put them together and make a movie. And we did. Yeah.
So for anybody that doesn't know, could you give us a little tease as to what the movie is about?
Yeah, man, I probably should have done that before I ranted about making it. Yeah, so the movie is about a couple of underage slackers, you might say, who one of them finds out this girl he's been sleeping with might be pregnant. And so his buddy goes, well, maybe we should just have a few beers and talk about it. And the way that they get beer because they're underage is the way I used to, which is to go cooler hopping, which is where you would drive around looking for coolers in the beds of people's trucks and snatch one if you had the, we'll say, gusto to go over there and grab one. And so they steal a cooler and get it home, and inside are 2 human kidneys being illegally trafficked across the state of Texas. And now they're in a whole lot of trouble because they're in over their heads. And hopefully hilarity ensues from there, would I guess be the quick pitch of what the movie's about. Yeah.
In my review, one of my first things that I said about it was that I think the movie was very funny. And I, now knowing the backstory, have to ask, were any of the jokes based in some semblance of reality outside of the fact that it was livers?
I think a lot of, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the movie that was the kind of stuff that was like, oh, I would put that in a movie one day. You know what I mean? All the way down, like there's a throwaway line when the boys are coming home. They just stole the cooler, where one of them's talking about eating chicken salad sandwiches and how he'll never get to eat one again because they stole them. And it's just like a throwaway line, and you're like, you're kind of cutting into the middle of a conversation. And that was something that was in the movie because one time when I was cooler hopping, I got the cooler home with my buddies, and we opened it up and it like had someone's picnic lunch in it. And I felt really guilty about it. But of course I also got hungry, so I ate it. And it was like the best chicken salad sandwich I've ever had in my life, which put me in a really precarious position because like I knew the car that I stole it out of. And I live in a very small town, or I did. I grew up in one. So I would see this woman like around town, and I'd want to go up to her and be like, you make the best chicken salad sandwiches on earth. But then she would naturally be like, why do you know that? And you'd hate to be like, oh, well, that's because I stole the ones you made 2 weeks ago, and I'm really sorry about it. But yeah, so just stuff like, there's a lot of stuff like that. That's just stuff that is from my earlier years that just sort of found their way into the movie. And then obviously a lot of it's very made up, like nothing dangerous really ever happened to me, but some very dangerous things end up happening in the movie.
Now, whenever you, in your youth there, did you ever get caught doing any of that?
A couple times. Mostly, like you would just like, if they weren't coming at you aggressively, you would just be like, oh, I'm sorry, I got confused. My buddy said, go grab a cooler out of the wrong truck, my mistake. Because again, like I grew up in like very small town, East Texas. Like, have you ever seen the movie Bernie?
I have not.
The Richard Linklater movie? Okay. It's great. You should watch it. But it takes place and was shot in like a town 35 minutes north of where I grew up. So if you watch that movie, like that is very much the kind of people I grew up around. And so, yeah, normally you would be like, my mistake, sorry. And they'd be like, all right, well, just put it back, and the other alternative was someone starts really coming after you, in which is just drop it and run off. They're not going to get too mad, That was really what but the key to stealing a cooler, not that I want to inform anyone on stealing coolers or recommend it as a good idea, because it's not, was to make sure no one was around before you get out and go take it. That's probably the best way to go about it.
Sounds like some solid advice.
Yeah.
A master of the trade.
Oh, come on now. Don't put, yeah. I'm not fast enough anymore. I don't want to run from anyone.
So I'm curious, outside of just these ideas that you got from, I guess, life experience, were there any particular movies that inspired this idea?
Well, I don't think there weren't really that many movies that inspired like the initial idea of it. The idea really was just like 100%. Like a buddy of mine one time was like, what's the worst that could happen? You know, if we steal this cooler. In my brain said this. I was like, this is the worst thing that could happen, is we could open it up and there could be something terrible in it that puts us in a really bad position. So as far as the idea goes, I mean, that really was like the genesis of the idea. But there were a lot of movies that influenced the way we made the movie. Because we knew, obviously at the time, you know, I was 24 when we started shooting it. And so at the time I was well aware of our limitations. Like, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have the nicest equipment on planet Earth. And Justin Herring and I, my film partner on the movie, like, we did take a lot of influences in the way to make the movie work without making the movie expensive. So we were both really big fans. It was one of the things we became friends over, because we're like a lot of the same things. We're around the same age. Like, we both toured in metal bands for a little bit before we went to film school. Like, we have a lot of very weird things in common. And one of those things was that we both like really, really loved like the sort of like mid to late 90s like Miramax movies. So, you know, like Kevin Smith's like early work from like Clerks to like Dogma, the early Coen brothers movies, early Richard Linklater movies, like that, those sort of indie comedies that were like a really big thing in like the mid to late 90s, and all sort of had like ended up having that sort of cult following. Bottle Rocket by like Wes Anderson's another one. And so we really, really let that style sort of influence the movie of like, there's not going to be a lot of fancy camera movement. We're going to like block it and shoot it, block it and shoot it. Lots of, you know, sort of, the movie's going to be a lot of like two people talking. Like, when you hear the premise and you see like the trailer and you look over the movie, you're like, oh, there's a lot happens in this movie, and it's true, but it's a lot of it is told through just shots of people talking. Like, there's not any big set pieces. There's not like a big shootout action sequence. There's nothing in it where we were like, we're going to push ourselves beyond the like bounds of what we have the money to do. But if we make a movie that kind of feels like one of these 90s movies that we really loved, well, then maybe we should just lean into that. Like, let's just make one that has that sort of nostalgic quality that reminds people of those movies and is still good, because it was, you know, because we didn't try to shoot for the moon when we knew we couldn't get there. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, so definitely like early Kevin Smith movies, the Coens were huge influences on just the way we made the movie. And I think people seem to say that worked, because most of the time when we were screening it during our festival tour and all that, those were the movies that people came up to us afterwards and they were like, oh, it really reminds me of like this and that. And so there was a lot of like someone told, I think a few times we heard it was Mallrats meets No Country for Old Men. And I was like, I guess so. Yeah, I'll definitely take it. It's a very kind thing to say. I don't think our movie is nearly as good as either of those movies, but like, I'll certainly take it.
Yeah, if you can evoke that in people's minds, I'd take that any day.
Right. But yeah, that happened a lot. You know, it's just those sort of movies, and even like the early Tarantino things where someone's like, yeah, it's like if the kids from Clerks accidentally got caught up in the plot of Reservoir Dogs, you know, or something like that, this would be what happened. And you're like, yeah, maybe, you know, so yeah, so like it very much has an air of those movies. It feels familiar to that time, which was intentional. That was important. Like on set, whenever me and Justin were trying to figure out how we were going to do what we're doing and sort of taking things day by day, that was always one of like the big touchstones. Because like I grew up sharing a room with an older brother who was like 7 years older than me. So I think he graduated high school in 2001. So, you know, like those late 90s comedies, like those were his high school movies, which he would watch in our bedroom, which means when I was like 11, I was like, these are my favorite movies. These are great. And so that was the way we would like relate it. We were like, we want to make the kind of movie that like if you were 13 years old, you would love this movie, but your parents would never let you see it. You know, like this is the kind of movie you like sneak over to your shitty friend Travis's house, you know, where his parents like don't care if he watches R-rated movies, and you rent it from Blockbuster and watch it 25 times that night and then come home and feel like you got away with something. Like that should be like the North Star of this movie. Like that's what we're trying to make. Like we're trying to make a movie that we would have really loved when we were like 14 years old, you know, like, so that was definitely something that was kept in mind. Like we're not trying to make anything that's going to like be that's going to make you think. We're not trying to be smarter than you. You know, we're like, that's not what kind of movie this is. We're like, it's going to be 75 minutes, you know, so it's a feature film, but it's not long. We're not going to waste your day. It's going to be really fast. It's going to be fun. And hopefully when it ends, you would just go, oh, that was a good time. That was all we wanted from people when they watched the movie. And so those are the things we really tried to make sure we did, I guess.
And I think that length for the movie really worked for, like what you said, just having an experience with it that you can walk away and say, yeah, that was a really good time. And it's a fun watch too.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm like, and those are all things, like I was saying, that were baked in from the start. Like the movie takes place in a day, which was one of those things that we were like, that's good. I was like, when writing it, I was like, that's going to work for whenever I come to make it. Cause the characters only need one set of wardrobe. You know, we just get two of all the same clothes, and now we never have to get confused about what people are wearing. And we can make a movie and we can stick to our story, because the movie is very plot driven. You know, like there's a lot of this happens, therefore this happens, but this happens, so now this happens. It's very much like being carried by the story. And the characters are important. Like we like the characters, and people need to enjoy them and have a good time with them. But at the same time, it's a narrative that allows us to be like, you know, you don't have to worry about how Mark was raised, because we're never going to see that. You're going to see him when he wakes up until the end of that day. And you don't really even need to know what happens 2 weeks from then. That's not important. Like this is about one day. Strap in. It's not going to take that long. It's a story, you know, a singular story is going to be told. And we just hope you have fun watching it. And that's just the sort of stuff like we tried to make sure that instead of cutting corners at points due to cost and time and all these sort of things, that we had just sort of rounded our movie off enough ahead of time to where like, well, now there are no corners. There's nothing to cut. We'll just stick to the plan and everything will work, because we didn't overexert ourselves in any way.
So you mentioned a couple times that idea of maintaining within a low budget there. And
Yeah.
One thing that I got from talking to the directors of What Doesn't Kill Us is that it sounds like in a college environment like that a lot of people are very happy to help each other. And is that something that you experienced making Camino?
1,000,000%. So if anyone listening also listened to the What Doesn't Kill Us interview with Jacob Kiesling and Zach Schlapkol, they both worked on Camino. Like they were on the crew. Zach was an electrician, and you can see him in the background, like pretending to play soccer at one point when the guys are like looking for coolers. And then Jacob was our gaffer. And then Ethan Cartwright, who I believe also is one of the 3 filmmakers behind What Doesn't Kill Us. He wasn't on the podcast, but Ethan was our key grip on Camino. So yeah, like very much so. I think Justin and I might be the only 2 people who aren't in What Doesn't Kill Us, because they started shooting that in like August and we had wrapped Camino in like June. So we were like the 2 people who were too busy trying to make our movie for like to go put oatmeal on our face and pretend to be zombies, I think. And so, but yeah. So we definitely had a very similar experience of, it's a small town. It's a really small town. And I was born there. Like I'm from there. And so when I was writing the screenplay, there's a lot of stuff. I was like, I know where this location's going to be. It's going to be this place. And I'll go and I'll ask the owner if we can just come in on the days they're closed, because he's known me for years, you know? And that was true across the board. We didn't pay for a single location. We didn't pay for any extras. We didn't pay for a ton of stuff, because it was a lot of just people being like, hey, yeah, you guys need something? That's neat. Come on down. You know, like the character Becky in the movie works at a restaurant called Avo's, like a little Greek restaurant. that is a restaurant that was like a block away from my house at college. And me and Justin ate lunch there probably 500 times during our college years. Because it was like equidistant between like my house and the film department. So we just met there to eat all the time. And yeah, like that was one of the owner of that place is named Avo. The restaurant's not called that, but that's his name. And he came over to the table because he had heard that me and Justin were making a movie. And he was like, "You guys need a restaurant?" And we were like, "Yeah, actually." And he was like, "Well," he's like, "You guys know we're closed on Sundays." He's like, "I'll leave you the keys. Y'all can do whatever you want with it." He's like, "Honestly, I owe y'all because y'all probably spent $5,000 a piece here over the last like 4 years just eating shawarma and burritos and hanging out." And so it was a lot of stuff like that, you know, just like people we knew who just thought it was fun to make a movie and wanted to be a part of it. And so, yeah, that whole small town East Texas thing. I know Jacob and Zach said it at one point in their interview, but it's true for our movie too. You know, like we couldn't make that movie anywhere other than where we made it. You know, Lufkin, Texas and Nacogdoches, Texas, these two little towns with a combined population of like 65,000. But you know, like if I'd have tried to make that movie in Houston, couldn't have done it. I wouldn't have had the money. I wouldn't have been able to get access to the things I needed. And yeah, but it worked in East Texas because people just are down to like hang out and like let you do what you want. And you know, one of our investors in the movie was a local city councilman. So it was like, "Oh, we need cop cars." And he was like, "Well, I'll get you a meeting with the chief of police," because I know him. We just called him up and we went and talked to him and like the city council as like a team. And, you know, we were 24-year-old like college kids. I didn't have any sort of political pull or money to like entice someone to let me do anything. But because I was in a small town, they were like, "Yeah, we're taking these two off the line, decommissioning them. So if you can get your own like vinyl siding, we'll leave the lights and everything and all the controls in it for you, and you can have a couple free cop cars." You know, and that's good luck doing that in Los Angeles. Good luck doing that in Chicago or New York. Not happening, you know. We got permits to like block off a couple streets downtown to shoot, and it was free. They didn't care. They were like, "Yeah, it sounds fun." Like, so, you know, that's the whole small townness of it really ended up meaning a lot.
That's something that I think is really something to admire, I guess, about that kind of small town spirit whenever it comes to making a movie, especially whenever you do take into account that trying to shoot something in LA or somewhere a lot more populated and movie focused would probably not be that easy.
No, and I try to tell as many people that as I can because, you know, we ended up accidentally being pretty successful with this movie after we made it. You know, we did I think we ended up doing 16 film festivals in our circuit and bringing home like 7 or 8 awards. Like we won a bunch of stuff we did not expect to win and got into a lot of places we did not expect to let us come hang out. And in doing that, you know, you get to speak on some panels here and there at some of these festivals, and there's a lot of inspiring filmmakers, and which always felt weird because it'd be like an aspiring filmmaker because they'd be like, "What would you say to, you know, young filmmakers?" And I'm like, "I'm 25. I'm telling you exactly the same things I just learned, or I'm learning as we go," because we didn't really know. But that's one of the things I push to people a lot. You know, it's like even if you moved to LA or if you're in New York now or you're in Atlanta or Chicago, you know, wherever maybe you went to Santa Fe because New Mexico's doing pretty well right now with their film stuff. If you want to make a movie and, you know, you're a kid from some small town in Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wyoming or Texas or Oklahoma, whatever, write a movie about where you're from and go back to where you're from and make it. You know, you can live in LA and work and get your funding, but like go make a movie in Topeka, Kansas, you know, whatever. Because they're going to be willing to work with you in a way that LA won't. And it inherently will provide something unique to your movie, you know, because like one of the things when we were doing festivals that people kept bringing up was they were like, "Oh, this is such a fun movie. We really like it. The story's so fun." And also like, what a great choice to put it in East Texas. Like, you know, like there's such like a vibe to it. Like it looks such a way. It's so quirky, you know, or whatever the hell they want to say. And you're just like, it wasn't a choice. Like that was the only way we could do it. But people respond to it because you're providing something unique, because it's not just another movie in LA. And it's not another movie that's about people in their apartments in New York. You know, it's about people we haven't seen in a movie, you know, like people at film festivals in LA and New York and all these places you go to haven't seen 20-year-olds getting in trouble in East Texas. So they think you've done something really creative when really you're just providing the thing that you have, you know? So if you're in a big place now, don't just be another kid making a movie about a kid in a big place. Like go back to where you're from and make something about where you're from. Like that matters, and you'll have an easier time of it. I truly believe that. Like you will have so much easier of a time making a movie in Bloomington, Indiana or whatever than you would trying to make it in Los Angeles.
Could you tell me a little bit more about what that festival run was like and getting to show off a big endeavor like that?
Yeah, so that was really wild. Because when Justin and I finished the movie, you know, that was like the first goal was just to get it done, because Justin needed to graduate from college. And you know, anytime you're making anything, like that's like the first step is just to get the thing done, because so many movies get shot and then never get edited, or they get edited and then they never get sound done, or they never get color finished. And there's all these things that can really bury a movie. And so once we finished the movie, our goal was to just get into any film festival. We were like, I want to premiere it at a film festival that people have heard of, where a bunch of strangers will show up and watch our movie, like in a real theater. You know, we're like, these are people who don't have to be nice to us. They're not our friends and family. Like I want to screen the movie in front of strangers. That was like the goal. And so I made a list of 10 film festivals that I was like, if we get into any of these, it would be amazing. Like that would be huge. And the first 9 all said, no, thanks. And the 10th one was the Lone Star Film Festival, which is a pretty big film festival up in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. If you're not familiar with Fort Worth, because you're not from Texas, it's where TCU University is, if you're like a football fan, college football fan. But it's like a city about 30 minutes outside of Dallas that also has like 1 million people. It's like a little mini Dallas next to Dallas. And they have a film festival there called the Lone Star Film Festival. It's amazing. You know, it's all spread out through the whole downtown. They're running like 6 theaters. There's like 250 movies there. It's a very big to do. And yeah, so we got into that and had our world premiere there in a theater that sat 210 people. I remember thinking that was way too big. It sold out, which was super intimidating because like, this is way too many people to watch our little movie. And I think, what was it? Me and Justin, when we were there on the schedule that year, like the movie that screened right before us was like a animated film with Paul Rudd and Patton Oswalt in it that I can't remember the name of right now. And then the movie after us on the schedule was Lion, the Nicole Kidman movie from a couple years ago. And then in between there is like our little movie we made for like $25,000 in East Texas. We were like, this is going to be a bloodbath. Like no one here gives a shit about our little movie. And yeah, so we had our premiere there and ended up winning the Audience Choice Award, which was amazing. And so when we won that, the programmers of the festival were like, what do y'all have next? And we were like, well, nothing. Y'all were like last on our list. And they were like, well, you need to start submitting to stuff, because now that you've won an Audience Choice Award, that'll show other programmers that like, hey, at least one audience was like, we got our money's worth. We really liked this thing. And so we just started submitting again, and we ended up doing 16, I think, film festivals all over the U.S. and internationally. We ended up winning like the best film. We ended up winning best feature film at a film festival in Bulgaria, which is the craziest thing because that couldn't be further from like our little town of 20,000 people. You know, like it's that was all really wild, and it seemed like we just sort of kept going to things and just being our movie. You know, it's like, yeah, we're just a couple of guys who made a little movie, and we hope you have fun. And that was what we said at like every screening, and we kept winning awards because I think people liked to just have fun at the movies. And especially at film festivals, you know, where you can have like people are watching like 9 movies a day sometimes, and sometimes it's 9 dramas. You know, it's like 8 like heart-wrenching terrible movies, you know, or like I mean terrible in the sense of like really hard on you, not like the movies are bad. And sometimes people were just so excited to have this little like 75-minute like fun factory jammed in the middle that you didn't have to take seriously. Like you could just watch it. And I think that really helped us get a lot of traction. And so that was, I think, over like 14 months or something. We did like 16 festivals and won 7 or 8 awards, and it screened all over the place. A handful of times in Texas. It was in Bulgaria. It was in Virginia. It was in LA, it was in Oklahoma, it was in a lot of places that we never expected anyone to see the movie. And yeah, that ended up sort of being like our steps 2 through 10, you know, we're just doing all these festivals and getting to know people and asking them about, you know, their experience with their independent films and, you know, what are you doing and how are things going? And all of that led to us eventually reaching the spot where we're like, well, I guess we should find a way to release this movie. You know, like we'd had a few distributors reach out and start to talk to us and trying to sort all that mess out. Cause you know, you're like, when you make a movie, you don't know what you're supposed to do with it once you have one. You're like, I have a movie now. I don't know what to do with it. And so we started figuring that out as we went. And, yeah, it was a pretty long little run of, like the way me and Justin talk about it now is, I think it was February of 2015 when Justin and I decided, hey, we're going to make Camino. That's what's happening. We did principal photography in June of 2015. The movie was finished in, I think, April of 2016. World premiere November of 2016. Festivals from then through like the middle of 2018. Movie got released through Amazon February 8th, 2019. So from February of 2015, we're like, let's make a movie, to February 2019 when people can go on Amazon and watch it. And it was 4 years. And so much of that was just 2 guys who had never made a movie figuring out what the hell we're supposed to be doing. Slowly but surely, like one step at a time, trying to, you know, okay, we've done this. Now what do we do? How do we get one of these? You know, and it's just the stuff of like, oh, how do we get subtitles made? You know what I mean? Like little things that you're just trying to figure out as you go. You never think about when you're making a movie, you know, and you're like, oh, I got to get all my paperwork in order. Well, like what paperwork do we even need? Like, how do we prove that we made this movie legally? You know, like what, all this stuff we need to have that we don't know about. And that was a very labor inducive time. I made a lot of phone calls and sent a million emails. Just trying to figure out what it was I was supposed to be doing. Cause you know, lots of just like, hey, if you could help me out in any way, I'd really appreciate it. Cause I don't know what I'm doing, you know? And, slowly but surely we got where we ended up.
Well,
yeah.
I'd like to ask, what was the feeling like, I guess, whenever you had that world premiere of the movie? Were you nervous or just excited?
Oh God. So that day, originally our game, like we were trying to feel kind of relieved because it was like the way that festival works is there's movies Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then the awards are Saturday at 6:00 is the award ceremony. And then on Sunday, they just rescreen the movies that won awards. So really the festival's like over for most people by Saturday. And our movie was scheduled to screen like Saturday at like 3:00. So we were like, well, at least we don't have to worry about trying to like win anything because the awards are like 3 hours later. They already decided who's going to win all the stuff. So like, that's pretty low pressure. Well, that was like the way we were trying to justify it because we were super nervous. Like I said, like some of the movies that were at that festival were like the kind of stuff where you know, you don't have faith in yourself or maybe as much as you should, or you're a little self-conscious. And you know, the dirty little secret, you know, that like our movie cost $25,000. Like every name in the credit was like a kid who was still in college, who was a friend of ours, like working for free. They're like, Nicole Kidman's movie is here. You know, you're gonna psych yourself out. You're like, some of these movies we had seen up to that point, you're like, that movie cost like $12 million. Our movie did not. It didn't even get close, you know? And so then on the day of the screening, we found out we were screening in this 210 seat theater, and we were kind of nervous because we're like, man, like 12 people are going to show up. and this room's going to look empty, and that's going to be terrible. So we were trying to I actually went downstairs of the venue, like out onto the street, and was just trying to like talk strangers into being like, hey, you want to come in and see a movie? Like $5, you know, like just trying to like hustle people in. And then all of a sudden people just started flooding in from all the other screenings getting out, I guess. And we sold out. So then we were super nervous because we were like, oh no, now there are too many people here. Originally I thought it was going to be empty, but now I don't need this many people to see my little movie because they're going to realize that we're frauds and we're not supposed to be here, you know, and this is going to go bad. And, God, I was super nervous. I got married a year after we premiered the movie. And I was significantly more nervous premiering the movie than I ever was getting married. Not even close. Like, at least with the marriage, I was like, well, this was at least my decision. You know, I was like, I got into it. I'm doing this because I want to do it. You know, this is fine. But when you're in there with the movie, you're like, I don't know these people. I don't have any say in who walks in this door. Like, they could all walk in here and tell me I'm the biggest asshole on earth and send us both like fleeing from Dallas with our tails between our legs. So I was super nervous. And then the movie started, and honestly, I was a little shocked that it was actually our movie, because there's still that little voice in your head that's like, well, maybe a different movie will play. Maybe they just screwed up, you know? And about like 5 or 6 minutes in was like the first like laugh from the crowd, and that felt pretty good. And then honestly, by about halfway through the movie, the crowd was having such a good time. Like, everyone was laughing and just like really getting into it. And it was the best feeling on planet Earth. It was so much fun. And like Matt and Cody, who play the two leads in the movie, were there. And Bonnie, who plays Becky in the movie, was there. And we all got to come up and do a little Q&A after. And that was like 20 minutes. And every question was just like about how fun the movie was and how much they enjoyed it. And like, you know, hey, I thought your performance was great. Like, we really loved this part. Like, what was the idea for this? You know, like, we just had so much fun. And of course that ended up like the movie and the Q&A ended, and we go like right to this award ceremony, and they ended up giving us this giant award, like, congratulations. And it was like that. It was like a one of the coolest like 2.5 hour stretches I have ever experienced. So yeah, definitely super nervous at the start, and ended up being just like one of the top 10 days. It was the best. We had so much fun. So yeah, I definitely I could also, but having said that, I could definitely see the situation where if it was crickets like 20 minutes into the movie, I might have thrown up. I mean, it was bad. So I'm glad it went really well.
Yeah. So getting back to, I guess, a little more in the making of, or even building up to the festivals, were there any challenges that you couldn't believe would actually be affecting your movie that made you almost doubt just the whole project?
There were a lot, man. So you've seen the movie, obviously.
Yep.
Like I said earlier, the whole movie takes place in a day. It rained the first 14 days we shot. Oh. And there's no rain in this movie when you watch it, because that was the one bit of continuity we can't control. You know, we're like, oh, it's all one day. Wardrobe's going to be easy. But if the sun's not up, you're kind of shit out of luck. And it rained like for 14 days. And generally the way you schedule a movie is you shoot all your exteriors first, because that way if it rains, you can go inside and you don't lose a shoot day, you know? To where if you've shot all your interiors and then at the end of your schedule you just had exteriors and it starts raining, well, what are you going to shoot? Now you're just wasting time, right? But it rained so much those first 2 weeks that we had almost shot like probably 80% of the interiors of the movie, you know, and me and Justin were rescheduling so much and doing all this shit. And it really, there were some days where you know, and that's the other thing, is just how exhausted you get, because, you know, crews calling, like everyone's meeting up at 8 a.m.'s call time, right? And you're shooting like a 12-hour day or 16-hour day. And then it's raining the whole time. So me and Justin and Peyton Paulette, who was our AD, and Russell Blair, who was our DP, end up going back to our office and rescheduling all the stuff we didn't get and trying to figure it all out. And you're staying up till 4 a.m. every day. You're kind of working 20-hour days for like weeks on end, which just wears you down. You just get tired. And so there were definitely some days in that like post shoot meeting, you know, where Justin and I and everyone are looking at each other and we're like, if it rains 3 more days, we're not going to get the movie shot. It's just not going to happen. We're going to run out of money. Like we won't even finish filming. You know, so there was definitely some of that was just really rough. It just wouldn't stop raining. We actually had one day out on the golf course or the driving range set where a tornado hit. Like we had a tornado come through set. We had a couple pop-up tents that were like protecting our equipment from the rain. And originally they were to protect us from the sun because it's also June in East Texas, like 108 degrees. And storm started rolling in and it got bad fast. And all of a sudden we started getting, you know, tornado watch, tornado warning, all that stuff. And there's only one little house on that plot of land. It's like 60 acres with like a 1-bedroom house on it. And so next thing I know, everyone's running inside. We're trying to bring all the equipment into the house because the pop-up tents got blown away. They're just gone. You can't find them. And so everyone's inside taking their clothes off, trying to dry the equipment out. And there's just like all of a sudden, I think it ended up, we had like 25 like really sad, soggy, like college kids hanging out in one room in their underpants with a bunch of equipment because everything was just ruined and wet. And the one person we had sent to go get pizzas for dinner couldn't get back because the road had washed out. Oh. So we were all just stranded there. And that sucked. That was terrible. You know, that's like that sort of stuff. We were like, I don't know if this is going to happen. And I remember we ended up finding one of the pop-up tents. It looked like a Coke can that someone had stomped on. And we found it like 600 yards away in a pond. Ooh. Like it had got picked up, crushed, and just thrown. And yeah, like, I mean, like we had some real weather problems. And we ended up having to leave the grip truck with all the equipment at the driving range because like we couldn't get it out because the roads were just destroyed. And obviously there's an El Camino in the movie, which is a very important part of the movie, and it was out there. And I don't know if you've ever seen an El Camino in person, but they're like 4 inches off the ground. So any sort of mud, you can't drive one. And so it was stuck out there. And like that was a day definitely when we were like, I don't know if this movie's gonna get made, because like we literally just had a storm like destroy all our stuff and just leave the rest of our stuff stranded in like a pasture in the middle of nowhere. Trying to think of any other, like we had a few times where we had some corrupt cards and corrupt footage while we were shooting and lost entire scenes. That led to a couple of nights of me and Justin just like shame eating gummy bears that we bought at like a CVS and just being like, why are we even trying? Like if the movie's just going to not, if the shit we shoot isn't even going to show up, why are we bothering? You know? But it did get done, that's like, I think on the last 2 days or the last day of shooting, we shot like 18 pages in order to finish the movie, which if you've never made a movie, normally you shoot like 3 pages a day. Like that's a pretty good clip. We shot 18 across like 5 locations. It was batshit. We shot so much, which was like a fifth of the whole movie. It was like shot in a day. Cause that's what it was like. We were like, well, we have to, or else the movie doesn't work. So, yeah, there were definitely plenty of problems that came up that we did not foresee that really almost ruined things. But didn't, because we had an awesome crew and because the crew was all friends. Like we were all buddies from college. We were all in college. And so luckily we had a little bit of I think we had youth on our side, you know. I'd just be like, well, we got to try again tomorrow, you know, and luckily we got it all done. But yeah, there were definitely some troubles for sure.
So I'd imagine that days like that, like dealing with tornado warnings on a set, I'd imagine that those experiences made being at that premiere, getting to see people laughing for the first time in your movie, that had to have been almost surreal.
Yeah, it is. It's really weird. The way I describe making a movie that everyone can kind of relate to is I call it the road trip effect. So it's like, you know, when you go on a family road trip and grumpy because you're like, I'm stuck in the back of the Suburban with my little sister, and she just got car sick and puked on my shoes, and the batteries in my Game Boy just died, and this sucks, and I hate it. This is bullshit, you know? And then a couple years later, you're like, all of a sudden it's a funny story. You're like, hey, remember when we were on that road trip to Disney World or whatever, and Rebecca puked on your shoes? That was hilarious. You don't realize how bad it was. Like, you have this, like, there's this like veneer of nostalgia that like falls over it. And that's exactly what happens when you make a movie. Like, you get done and they sort of become these fun stories of like, hey, remember that time that tornado came through and we all had to kill like 9 hours in a 1-room shack together? And like one of the things, like, when that happened, that ended up happening is we ended up finding like a bunch of saran wrap and making like saran wrap balls. And I think I was laying on the ground and Justin was standing up like 20 feet away. And we were both like, he stood up with his mouth open. I laid down with my mouth open. And we were like playing a game to see who could shoot a saran wrap ball like into the other one's mouth, like me throwing it from the floor and him trying to like angle one in from like across the house. And that became something like that, like, you know, at a point there's like 10 people watching and like one of you finally makes it and you're like, this is the best. You know, like, look what I've accomplished. Because you're just like, you're going crazy. And maybe like Stockholm syndrome is setting in or something, but you're having like but in hindsight, you're like, oh, that was like kind of fun. Like, we really did have kind of a good time because it got done. And so yeah, it definitely kind of all pays off in the end. And there's something surreal in general, I think, about watching your own movie, premiere or otherwise. Cause you really don't see them anymore as like a narrative film. They kind of feel like a home movie. Because each scene just reminds you of what was going on that day. You know, like, you're not really thinking about the story as it goes. You're like, oh God, that day sucked. Like, every time I see the driving range, I just instantly think of like that day that we almost all died in a tornado, you know, or whatever. And I don't even register that there's like stuff happening for the movie. You're just like, whatever. So yeah, it's all pretty surreal, but it's definitely worth it. Like, there's not a part of me that feels like, oh, we shouldn't have done it. Like, it's all worth it. And, yeah.
So now that you've seen such great feedback on this movie and that you've had a great run with festivals and that it's finally kind of completed its journey and is now available for anybody to watch on Amazon, would you say that, or do you have any ideas going forward for what you might want to do next?
Yeah, so I've got a couple scripts sitting around. There is one in particular that Justin and I are currently working out the last little bit of funding on. That is hope that if everything breaks right, like, we have a next film. Yeah, like, we should be. It's 4 years after the last one. You know, it took a little while, but yeah, we should be ready to roll on one before too long, hopefully. Yeah, you know, so there's more stuff coming. A lot of that was just like I was saying earlier, with just not knowing what to do with our first movie. That really prolonged the amount of time between the first and the second film, you know, and like, so now going into the idea of making another one, we just have so much more information than we did and so much more confidence in what to do with it. You know, to where now we kind of have the mindset of like, oh, we could make this movie. We know we can get it into some film festivals because we figured out how to do that. And, you know, if it sells at a festival, that's great. You know, if not, we know who to reach out to distributor wise. Like, we have connections to where, like, you know, if it took 4 years to get the first movie out, we could make another one. If say we shot a film tomorrow, we started shooting a film, we could have it on Amazon and out for people or whatever by like this time next year if we needed to, you know, and that, or like within 18 months, you know, again, that's just the sort of confidence that we didn't have with the last one. That's really made it a lot easier to sort of go into the idea of doing another one and the idea of approaching financiers and stuff of like, you know, it's so difficult to get money. We didn't have a lot of money to make Camino. It's not a spoiler to say however much money we end up getting on this next film, it's still not going to be a lot of money, you know. But it is still easier. It's so much easier to get money when you can sort of go to financiers and potential funding with the ability to show them a product of like, look, I know how to come up with it, make it, and get it across the finish line. Like I could get it out into the world. Which is that's something that's even been helpful of like, it's even like even on the tiny micro budget scale that we're working in, you still suddenly have the capacity to be like, hey, I can at least make it. I can't tell you how much money it will ever make in its life, but coming back, no clue. But I can tell you it can be available. Like I can do that. And like we were saying earlier, in the independent film world, that's not common. There's a lot of movies that never get done, that no one ever sees. You think of how many times you've been on like some actor's IMDb page and they have like 9 movies that are all still like in progress. And one of them says like 2013. And you're like, how is it still in progress? Because it's hard. It's really hard. So yeah, no, I mean, we're definitely looking to make another flick. It will be, I don't want to give away too much. But I will say it's another sort of dark comedy. But that the scale is larger. We are getting a little bit less in that like sort of 90s comedy zone and a little more open. And there's a little bit more like expanse to it. And it's just generally like a little more ambitious of a film. But it is still a dark comedy because I found in my screenwriting, I don't want to say career because that sounds like a lie. But in my screenwriting experience, I really like writing things that are supposed to be funny at the end of the day because that feels like fun. Like writing a serious work feels like serious work. It does, like, like it's not fun to be up till 5 a.m. being like, what's the most tragic thing that can happen? But it is fun to sit up till 5 a.m, bullshitting with your buddy, being like, what's the funniest thing you can think of to get from point A to point B? That is a good time. At least for me, I enjoy the hell out of doing it. And so, it's going to be another dark comedy. We're going to try our damnedest to shoot it in Texas again. And we'll see how it goes.
Have you guys gotten away from Texas since then?
Not really. No, not really. So Justin and I both live in Houston now. So we jumped to the biggest city in Texas, but we're still in Texas. And we both worked on some stuff, a lot of stuff since then, just, trying to keep roofs over our heads. But anytime it's come to like a narrative production of any kind, Texas is the first thing that comes to, because I've had such a good experience with it. So even people who are maybe not from here or like outside looking in, I just recently produced and edited a short film for a friend of ours, or a friend of mine. Justin knows him too. We're a friend of ours, who lives in Atlanta now and is doing his stuff out there and has like a couple of people he likes to work with in Atlanta. But we shot it here in Texas, because that was one of those things. It's like, man, just get over here. Maybe I'm being lazy because I just want to have a home field advantage the whole time, but it's like, I know how to do things here that I can't do in other places. There are phone numbers I can call and we can get things in a couple hours. They just aren't going to show up in New York or LA or whatever. So, I hope that my goal in life would be to get to just keep making movies in Texas, which is, something that particularly if you're a filmmaker from Texas, but even not, you realize a lot of people in Texas, like Texas kind of has a history of like Texas filmmakers, like Richard Linklater and Terrence Malick still live in Austin and they still make their movies here because they just don't want to leave, like David Lowery lives in Dallas, who did a Ghost Story and Pete's Dragon and Ain't Them Body Saints. Like he made all those. I've talked to him. He moved to LA for like 6 months and then moved back to Dallas. He's like, I don't want to be there. There's just something about like the only like Texas filmmaker who left Texas is Wes Anderson. Like that's the only one I can think of. But like everyone else just wants to sort of stick around here. Like there is sort of an inevitable, like I don't know. There's just something to it. You like being here. And once you feel like you start to figure stuff out, you're like, there's just something in you that goes, I don't think I need anywhere else. Like I know there's bigger camera shops in LA, but there's not a single camera in LA I can't get in Austin, Texas. Like there's just not, so why bother?
It's that home field advantage.
Yeah, it's home field advantage. You're like, if you found out, if it's like if you were talking to any baseball team or football team, if you were like, hey, what if you found out a loophole where you could play all your games at home? No one would ever go on the road. Why the hell would you ever do that? So that's the goal. We're trying to make another feature film right here, and I hope to make another 10 right here. That'd be amazing.
I look forward to seeing it.
We'll see. We'll see if we can get some going.
But let's see. Back to whenever you mentioned that a new project would not take nearly as long now that you've got a lot of it figured out.
Yeah.
What would be some advice that you would go back and give yourself 4 years ago about getting that movie done?
Oh, man. So some advice that I would just give like anyone in general, so that like not even necessarily relating to like my own movie, like advice I could give myself about Camino, but just good advice for anyone who's trying to make a movie. I think Jacob and Zach might have actually said this in the interview you did with them. I don't remember. But like you should start writing, even if you're not a writer. If you're like, I'm not a writer, I'm a director, or I'm a DP, or I'm an actor, or I'm this, or I'm that, who knows? If you write the story, you get to hire yourself to do it. You get to cast yourself as the lead. This is the easiest way to get a job. If you're just walking around waiting for someone to go, hey, here's my feature film screenplay, I want you to make it, you're going to be waiting a long time, Start writing. And just try to get a little bit better at it. If you get hung up writing, just write anyway. There's like an old line that's like, you got to have something to change in order to change it. So if you're writing a screenplay and you're like, this scene sucks, this is so shitty and I hate it. Well, at least you know that. That's better than nothing. Keep going, and you can always go back and change that. What if 20 pages later you're like, oh, I love the end of this movie. And now all of a sudden you've got a beginning you like and an end you like, and it's like, well, just fix those 20 pages. That's a whole hell of a lot easier than starting over, Another thing that I heard in the interview with, who was it? Oh, Luca Guadagnino, who made Call Me By Your Name and A Bigger Splash, and just did the new Suspiria film, has this quote that's like, every movie's your first movie because you've never made that movie before. Like you've got some new tricks maybe, or maybe you think you have a way of doing it, but every movie is going to make you do something new. It's going to put you in a new spot. So like, I like to take that, especially for young filmmakers, as like, don't get in your head too much about like, oh, I don't know how to do this. You're never going to know how to do it. Every movie is your first movie. You will never make that movie before. It's going to be a new experience. So don't let you psych yourself out of like, oh, I don't know how to do this because I need to make all these movies to learn how to make movies. It's like, no, the way to learn how to make a movie is to make it. You're only going to like, I only know how to make Camino because I made Camino, but the next movie we make, I don't know how I'm going to do it. It's going to be a different thing. And like, that can sound intimidating in one way because you'll feel like you're always a little bit behind the eight ball, but just don't look at it that way. That's would be my advice. Just look at it as like, take it as something freeing of, like there's no one who's going to have a better skill set to make your story than you. So just have faith that you can go do it. Just go do the damn thing and quit letting money get in the way. That's another one for young filmmakers, which is like, it's one of these things in film. Everyone's really protective of their budget because they're always like, oh, I got to keep my budget a secret. That way, when some big distributor comes in and they think my movie costs $2 million, well, I'll get more money for it. That's not going to happen. And you're doing everyone else a disservice because you end up with all these kids and young independent filmmakers and older independent filmmakers, just filmmakers in general that are seeing like the movies that come through Sundance or South by Southwest or Cannes, that are like independent movies, but all cost $9 million or $4 million or $15 million. And they're like, ugh, it's impossible. I can't make a movie for less than $1 million. Like that's bullshit. Yeah, you can. Like we made a movie for 25 grand, give or take. And no one knew that. You know, it's not like they're going to scream at you. The movie done. It's all like if you have words on a paper and you have people read them out loud and you film it, you have made a film. This is like the bare bones that you need to make a movie are very simple. Like you can complicate it as much as you want, and you can add as many variables as you need to make something bigger or smaller or whatever. But if you have a camera and words on a page and someone to read them, you can make a movie. You really can. And so that would be another thing that I would put out there to people, like that kind of hand in hand with that. Like, hey, maybe go back to your small town, make a movie about where you're from, or set the movie. It doesn't have to be about where you're from, but set your movie where you're from, you know, or something where you have more pull that you don't necessarily have if you're in LA or New York or wherever the hell you are now. Because that's not going to be helpful. You know, like if there's a movie and you're like, I have this script and it's going to cost me $1.2 million to make it in LA, but I could make it in rural Georgia for $800 or for $80,000. Go to rural Georgia. What the hell are you doing? You know, like $25,000. That's a ton of money to you and me, right? I don't have a spare 25 grand, but it is an amount of money that almost anyone can get. You know, there's lots of ways to get money now. Like, do a Kickstarter for and raise 10 grand. You know, then go to a bank and get a $10,000 loan, or open a credit card with like an $8,000 limit. Guess what? You now have $18,000 at your disposal. Go make a movie for 18 grand. If it doesn't work, yeah, you're $8,000 in debt. Sorry about it. But like, you made a movie, you tried. You know,
a calculated risk, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. High risk, high reward. You know, that's the way this works. Like if you really want to make a movie, there's a way to do it. And I would just say to young filmmakers, like, stop psyching yourself out and stop looking at all these big budgets and getting in your head and freaking out about like, how am I supposed to get this money? Like, you don't need that money. Someone else got that money. It's not for you. You're going to have to get your own money. And your money might be 30 grand, might be 8 grand, might be 150. You know, like all of these money, like all of these dollar amounts in the scheme of a movie are very small. You know, they really are. And so just find whatever your story is, find the way you can make it right and make it for a dollar amount that's attainable. Quit worrying about shit you can't control, you know, and if you're sitting in your one bedroom or if you're sitting in your studio apartment in LA right now, thinking, I just need $2 million to make this movie, I think you're thinking wrong. You know, like because then you're in this spot where you're like, how am I ever going to get $10 million? And I'm like, the fair question. How are you going to get $10 million, $2 million or whatever it is? I don't know. But if you were sitting there in your apartment asking yourself, like, how do I get 25 grand or how do I get 50 grand? Well, that's a question you can answer. You know what I mean?
Keeping it simple, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you're just like, how do I get $40,000? Like there are answers to that question. How do I get $5 million? The answer is a miracle, you know? And you're like, I don't know how to manufacture one of those. So good luck to you. So yeah, that's my advice on the whole. Start writing, go to your hometown. Don't psych yourself out that you don't have experience, because you don't need it. You'll get it while you're making your thing, and make the thing you need to for the amount of money you have. Like Jacob and Zach and them made a movie for like, I don't know what the sum total was at the end of the day, but it's probably like $7,500. Like it's like nothing. And guess what? They have a movie now. That's amazing. You know, like and trust me, if Jacob Kiesling and Zach Schlapkol can do it, whoever's listening to this can do it. I know those guys, and they're more capable than I am, but they're not. I mean, come on, they're just people.
I'm sure they'd love to hear that.
I'm sure they won't be listening this far into it. They'll be like, I don't need to listen to John Slang. They'll turn me off. So we're fair. I think we're safe.
So I was overjoyed to get to check out another independent East Texas film, and I was really glad whenever you mentioned it to me that you'd like me to review it. But I, as a self-proclaimed critic, can really only say what I saw in the movie, and I'm curious what you would like to tell audiences about your movie. Is there anything that you would want to tell them directly?
I would just want them to know that like they don't have to overthink it. you know, which maybe is like, kind of like something that like for someone like yourself, you're like, you want to critique movies. Where my advice is to like turn off your critique brain, I guess would be what it is. Because like, yeah, like it's just like I've been saying the whole time, like it's a fun movie. It's just fun. Like, I'm not saying it's a stupid movie and you have to just like not think in order for it to make sense. The movie makes sense. The plot works, you know, all that sort of stuff. But I'm just saying, like, I just want you to have fun. Like, grab some buddies, turn it on in the back, like 75 minutes, you know, like there's some laughs in it. There's, you know, there's some really great performances by some really young, talented actors that you are not familiar with. And that can be fun in and of itself to get to know them. You know, just turn the movie on, have a good time. That's all I want. If you're sitting somewhere and you're like, I need something to do for the next hour, 20 minutes, fucking watch Camino. That's what it's for. You know, it's an entertainment product. Like, I want you to have fun, enjoy the movie, watch it, get some laughs out of it, and go back to doing what you're doing. You know?
Now, I will be sure to link the movie and on Twitter and you and to Amazon. But could you just mention to the audience where they could find you?
So you can find me on Twitter as John Hughes TX, as in Texas, and I'm on Instagram as John Patrick Hughes. You can find the movie on Twitter as Camino_movie. It's on Facebook at just facebook.com/Camino movie. We're on Instagram as Camino the movie. Like, you can find it anywhere. If you find me on Twitter or Instagram, like the first thing in my bio is going to be the links to the movies pages, so you'll find it that way. And if you want to watch the movie, it's on Amazon right now. If you type in Camino in the search bar, we are the first movie that pops up. A blue poster with an El Camino on it and a red cooler. Couldn't be easier to find. You know, it's like $10 to buy it. I think it's down. I think we recently marked it down to rent to like $2.99. If you have Amazon Prime, it's free. Just go watch it. You know, that's all we want. We just want you to be able to see the movie. If you know, hopefully if you have a good time and you enjoy it, or even if you don't, like whatever, leave us like a little rating and review. Tell us what you thought so that we can see it. Cause that's been one of the coolest parts of this, is just finally being able to see, you know, like getting sent screenshots, you know, from strangers, like Instagram stories that just have the movie on in the background. And you're like, that's really cool. It's been like I said, it's been 4 years. It's been like a really long thing to try to get anywhere. And it's very, very cool to just be able to see anyone see it. So if you're listening to this and then you end up going to watch the movie, like, please reach out and let us know that you saw it, because it's the best part of my day. Anytime someone does, it's just super cool. I really dig it. So yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, John. It was a pleasure.
Dude, thanks for having me. I hope I didn't ramble too much or take up too much of your afternoon here.
Thanks again to John Patrick Hughes for coming on to talk about his film, Camino. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on the Movie Take Podcast.